Today I'm going to be talking to you about balanced sentences. In a balanced sentence, the two parts of the sentence, or sometimes the paired sentences that are right next to each other, have parts that are roughly equal in length, importance, and grammatical structure. When you're reading the sentence aloud, you can pause between the two balanced parts, which makes them seem more equal. And if you're writing a balanced sentence, you would want to be certain that both parts of the sentence are parallel in their form, in terms of, where the subject and the verb is placed, and you want to make sure they're parallel grammatically as well. So, for example, life is a blink of an eye, death is a winter's hibernation. In this example, we have two sentences next to one another. Both begin with a noun, in this case, life and death, and then both followed by the word is. And then we see the metaphor for both of them. They're both described, one as a blink of an eye and one a winter's hibernation. So we can interpret that as life is something that passes very quickly because it's a blink of an eye, whereas death is something, when you compare a blink of an eye to a winter's hibernation, it seems like an eternity afterwards. And so by comparing the two and putting them next to each other, the sentence structure is reflecting the similarities and closeness of life and death, but also how different they are from one another. In the second example, this is a very famous one, to err is human, to forgive divine. And even though the second sentence does not have the word is as a verb, it's implied in the sentence. And it's actually probably intentionally left out. That's called an ellipsis. And the meaning, though, is essentially the same. And so they're balanced in the sense that they both have essentially the same number of words in it, and the ideas are right next to each other, and that they both start with the infinitive form of a verb, to err and to forgive. Some functions of balanced sentences, or the main function, I would say, is emphasizing the comparison between ideas. So you put them side by side so that they can be compared or contrasted in some way. And the actual rhetorical pattern, in other words, the way the sentence is arranged, shows that the writer is trying to make a comparison between the two things. In the first example, E.B. White says, on days when the warmth is the most important need of the human heart, the kitchen is the place you can find it. It dries the wet socks and it cools the hot little brain. And this part of the example, or in this example, the last part of the sentence, the one that comes after the semicolon, it dries the wet socks and it cools the hot little brain, is the part of the sentence that is balanced. And what it is doing is describing the ways a kitchen can bring peace. On the one hand, the first part of the sentence shows it's a place that's practical. It can be a place where you go get warm physically because you're removing wet socks and possibly drying them there. And it's also a place that can settle the heart. If your brain is feeling hot, in other words, if you're all fired up, it's a place where you cool down and you get away from the world. And so both examples side by side are ways that the kitchen is a retreat from the rest of the world. And by putting them side by side, it highlights that point. In the second example, James Boswell wrote, every man has a right to utter what he thinks truth, and every other man has a right to knock him down for it. In this sentence, the writer is juxtaposing two ideas. In other words, he's putting two ideas side by side, another thing that balanced sentences do. And he's pretty much cautioning the reader that if someone states an idea, he might get criticized for it by another person. And by putting it in parallel structure, or by creating a balanced sentence, he is highlighting that both rights exist equally. In other words, the right of the person to speak his mind, and then the right of the person who is going to retaliate for the thoughts that he has expressed. So even having them physically close to one another in the sentence, it's showing that consequences can result if you state an idea. And this is literally true in the sentence, where the consequence comes right after the comma. A few more examples of balanced sentences. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And that's a famous quote by John F. Kennedy. And just that last part, with the ask nots, are what is held in balanced form or parallel structure. In the second quote by Kennedy as well, he states, if a free society cannot help the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich. And here we're seeing that he's establishing a contrast between the first part of the sentence, that's balanced with the second part, saying basically we have to help the poor if we want to be able to help the rich as well. And then in the Japanese proverb, it says, vision without action is a daydream. Action without vision is a nightmare. And there we see kind of a climax building as well. And it's the truth, the idea that, if we don't follow through with our visions, then we're really not living life. And if we just act without thinking about it ahead of time, we can find ourselves in bad situations. So some of the examples above illustrate not only a balanced sentence, but they also use a device called antimetaboly. Basically, in antimetaboly, the order of the words is reversed so that the opposite meaning or the antithesis of the original meaning can be generated. So when the going gets tough, the tough get going. So there it's kind of flipping the meaning of things. You can take the gorilla out of the jungle, but you can't take the jungle out of the gorilla. So by putting them side by side, we're essentially creating what's called antithesis. And so to wrap up our review of sentence organization and sentence structures, we have gone over loose sentences, periodic sentences, and balanced sentences. I won't review the definitions again, but here the definitions are all together so that you can review them, and there's an example for each one as well. Thank you very much.